All right, guys, well, welcome to our part two of our discussion of the stages of manhood. In our last discussion, we talked about the first three stages, bringing us into our early 20s, and that's what we're gonna pick up in this video. So the next stage, which is stage 4, is called the lover stage. Now, the lover stage, this begins in about our mid-20s and moves through our 30s. This is where our heart starts to awaken to the beauty around us. Our heart might start to really notice the beauty in music, or the beauty in poetry, or the beauty in nature. All of these things, and then of course, we're going to move into the beauty of romance, and as we start to develop romantic relationships with women around us. If this man has been validated, he will recognize that true beauty is found in more than a woman's body. This is so key. We can know if we've moved through these stages well, that when, or at least one indication is that we can look around us, we can look at the beauty of nature around us, and we can really truly absorb and recognize that there is beauty, but it's more than just in sexuality, in a woman's body. The validated man will be much more apt to treat women with respect and will express his sexuality in a God-honoring way, which, as from our Christian Christian beliefs, that means sexuality happens only within the marriage bounds of a husband and wife. That's the only place that sexual unity is to happen, is between husband and wife. And so as the truly well-validated man moves into starting to develop feelings for women around him, he is going to be very respectful, and he's going to treat her in a respectful way, in a God-honoring way. Now, very few men in American culture, and I would say inside the church and outside the church, have come to a point where they operate this way. There aren't a large population of guys who do this. And I would suggest it's probably because a lot of them have not had this good, appropriate validation from a loving and nurturing dad that then pointed into the importance of accepting and living under God's authority in their lives. And when that understanding of living under God's authority has not been established in a young man, then he is going to do whatever feels right in order to be validated. And if that means he gets his validation through the sexual exploits with women, then that's what he's going to do. And he's not going to have a whole lot of remorse or anything like that about it, because he is accomplishing what his heart, what his body is telling him to do, which is get validation, which should have happened from dad. Our success as men, as we pass into this lover stage, begins so many years ago when, as little guys, we had a father who told us, you are loved, you are acceptable, you are lovable, just because you're who you are. And then that validation causes, it's almost like a stability or a settling inside of us that says, I am enough inside of my skin because my dad said so. And then I learn, not just because my dad said so, but because God said so. And that settles us inside. Okay, so that is the lover stage. If we move well through the lover stage, when we get into stage 5, oh boy, this is an amazing stage of life. And this is called, John Eldredge calls this the king stage. This stage lasts from a man's 40s, probably somewhere into his 60s. At this stage, the character of a man in his wholeheartedness, his whole being, his character has been shaped enough to be entrusted with wealth, with relationship, with love, with all of these things that are really important to us. And he has learned how to steward that well. He has learned how to be responsible with all of these things, and the people around him recognize that. This place is also a place where wisdom really starts to grow, starts to build inside of him. And also he starts to really understand what selflessness is. He starts to learn how to put his attention and his focus on other people and remove that focus from himself. If he would get married, his focus is now on meeting his wife's needs. If children come along, his focus is now meeting his children's needs. He is supplying not just income for his family, but he is supplying for their emotional and relational needs as well. Now, if the person is single, if he is not married, then that king stage is still possible. His influence is to those around him, maybe people he works with, people that he goes to church with, maybe his extended family, his parents, brothers, sisters, cousins, all of those types of people, nieces, nephews. All of those folks are then the recipient of his kingly character that is being built inside of him. If we enter this stage, though, full of selfishness, we are going to hurt people. We will hurt our families. We will hurt our coworkers. We will hurt those around us. We will hurt our friends because this person is still living with a lot of selfishness inside of them, because they are still trying to find validation and they're having to do it themselves because the authority in their life has not bestowed that upon them. So they're still trying to earn that validation. And so if we have kids, then if we are still living in that selfishness, then we will probably create in them a resentment towards us. It's probably similar to the resentment that those of us who were not validated by our dads, the same kind of resentment that we had for them. Because it's a cycle, and the cycle will continue until someone breaks the cycle. And that's, for us as adults, that's when God breaks through and begins to validate us and validate us as his kids, his loved and accepted kids. Now, a man who has successfully entered the king stage of life provides an incredible model for other men around him that probably don't have this type of growth in their lives. His calling in life doesn't necessarily mean that he will be wealthy. A king in this life does not mean that we're rich, but it means that we handle money well. We handle money wisely. This man understands that his influence is to be used for the good of others, not just his own good. He understands that his life is not his own, that he has responsibility to the world around him. That's how a good king lives. But the man who has not successfully entered this king stage will continue hurting those around him, and his life will probably be marked by some type of moral weakness or irresponsibility or passivity or something like that is just a picture of what he is on the inside as he's trying to still figure out whether he has worth and where his worth is found. He might live with a deep sense of confusion or disappointment as to how life is turning out, because this wasn't what he wanted. He may still be we might be a 50, 60-year-old man who is still in the cowboy stage or the warrior stage, trying to prove his strength and his worth. The king doesn't need to prove anything to himself or others. He is living to serve and strengthen them. That's what the good king does. Ultimately, the insecurity felt in this stage still has its roots in that beloved son stage that question was never answered. Am I enough? Am I loved? Why? How do I know that I'm loved and cared for? He was probably never validated as a boy, and he was never able to make that transition into adulthood where then he has what is necessary to be able to validate others around him and to point them to their Heavenly Father to get their ultimate validation. Now that's the king stage. All right, so stage number 6, and this is called the sage stage, the sage stage. This stage begins somewhere around 60 and then moves on until the man passes away, until he dies. The silver-haired sage steps aside and lets younger men carry the load. But that does not mean that the sage's life is over. It does not mean that the sage now sits back in his lawn chair and watches TV all day and kind of checks out of responsibility. Not at all. If he has led well, he will be sought after for his wisdom and his counsel and his experience. The man who has entered this stage successfully is an incredible resource to those around him, family or not family. He has proven himself faithful to God, and he has been successful in his life. Wealth has nothing to do with it. A sage does not have to be rich. A sage has just handled himself well all through life. If he has children, they consider themselves blessed because he has led them well through his lifetime. His presence is no longer sought after because of what he can do. Now, men and women desire to be with him because of what he knows, because of his experience, because of his desire to now build into others and bring validation into others, to use his authority from his experience to bless so many younger people around him. His walk with God is rich. He is like Moses in Exodus chapter 33. There's an amazing verse in Exodus 33:11. It says that Moses' relationship with God is he talked with God like a friend. He talked to God face to face, like a friend talks to a friend. A sage has lived that way. They have come to know God. He's come to know God almost face to face, like it describes there with Moses. And people who are younger recognize that in him, and they want that. And he has such a desire to pass on what he knows, not for money, not for fame, not for attention, but to selflessly build into others and to help them grow in areas that maybe where they were not fathered as a child. The man who hasn't entered this stage successfully is a tragedy. He is a tragedy to himself as well as to those around him. Because the people who he might have been able to build into, they approach him and they recognize he really doesn't have anything for me. He doesn't have wisdom to build into me. I see what I do and I don't need what he has. And that man then maybe he starts looking back at his life and seeing, boy, if I would have just invested here, if I would have done this, if I would have lived this way. The person who enters this stage and has not lived well, there's the regrets that this man is going to live with. I would not want that. This man's foundation was probably built on his identity as a provider. And we need to be a provider. But if that's our only identity, when we retire, now what happens? My identity is gone. Our identity as men has so much more to do than just being a provider. It's being the lover, it's being the cowboy, it's being the warrior, it's being the king. And it's moving through these stages well and developing well to get to this point at the end of our lives where we want to just shower those around us with, how can I make them better? That's what the sage does. When we don't do that, this man is often left with confusion. His purpose is skewed. What do I do now? And so oftentimes it's, I'm going to sit in my rocking chair and drink a beer or I'm going to invest my life I want to go watch my kids play sports. I want to do, and those things are fine. But the sage has so much more to live for. He has such a bigger purpose to build into people. Okay, when you get ready to move into your small group time, I want you to look up a couple different passages. I want you to read these. I want you guys to talk about these. The first one is Deuteronomy chapter 6. You'll see what's there. This is God's beginning validation to the nation of Israel. He's talking about his love for them and how they love him back. He's beginning that relationship with them and making it a formal understanding to them. Then I want you to read Deuteronomy chapter 34. This is an absolutely beautiful passage where Moses he has come to the end of his life and he knows that he's done leading. And so he has this young man named Joshua that he's been mentoring for years and years now. And he knows that Joshua is going to take over leading the Israelites. So Moses has this amazing prayer time that it's actually recorded, Moses' last prayer over the Israelites and over Joshua. He is the silver-haired sage. He has led well, and now he is transferring his authority onto Joshua and all of the men and women who are going to lead the nation of Israel as they go into the promised land. So I want you to read over chapter 34 as well and take a look at what it looks like to transfer authority and to transfer that validation into others. Beautiful picture. So, where are you? Is your chronological stage of life consistent with your developmental stage? Whatever age you are, you now see, based on these stages of life, where you fit. The question is, how well have you come through these stages of life? Were you validated well? Have you been walking that validation out? Are you now choosing to validate others? If there are any of those areas where you are lacking, ask God to enter into your story and father you wherever you're at. So I want you to talk about this when you get into your small group time, and I will look forward to seeing you at our next video session.